We thought that Mandani would be dragged through the mud in the spring, but the Israelis have a restless nature and a thirst for immediate answers, so the trough arrived at Mandani almost instantly. It hasn't even been 2 weeks since the Satagrazia and the speeches about the unstoppable force of, how do you say it, Marxism, Trotskyism. Of course, we know that a promise can take 3 years to be fulfilled, and in the case of, let's say, the communo-fascists, it could even take 33 years. Mandani didn't manage to wait for the flight, but the fall was magnificent. Truly magnificent. So his main promise was, well, struck down by the very first court, and it was unforgettable. It was simply unforgettable, unforgettable. What will this start to mean for him and for New York? Of course, the most interesting part, we'll talk about that, but first, before talking about what this could bring us New Yorkers, let's figure out what he promised and why the Israelis got so furious. That's how I would put it. Don't forget. It means that your friends don't always have the right, well-rounded picture of the global mess, which entertains some and really upsets others. And a true friend will always share my videos with their loved ones. And of course, they'll take a jab at someone distant. But let's get back to the problems of the fascist liberals or the Communist Democrat of America, the admirer of Jews Zakhar Damandavi and his gang of assistants. The thing is, gentlemen, these scoundrels have decided that they can take property away from people they don't like. Well, or they behaved in a way that seemed offensive to their mother or lady, yes, or maybe they were just born Jewish, my God, born Jewish. And you see, that alone already offended any devout Muslim. Because Allah is Akbar, and this one, the Jewish God, well, like an idol, but they call him El or Yahweh too. Or whatever else, your El is no match for our Allah Akbar is greater than your El. Although, of course, it's actually the same God, but with a Muslim accent, he turns from the weak God of Abraham and Moses into the powerful God of Muhammad and Ishmael. But for Zakaram, it also means Akbar, Akbar. Well, it's a bit shortened now after the trial. Mamdani shortened it. As I already said, the trial, just an ordinary American court, which responded to Mamdani's proposal to take the house from the Jews. Chavo said, sorry, Chavo. And so he sat there with his mouth open until the end of the workday.
It is widely reported that Mamdani has just lost his first major lawsuit in federal bankruptcy court. The judge completely stopped his attempt to block the sale of more than 5,000 rent-regulated apartments. And here's the real irony. You'll never guess who the buyer was that Mamdani was trying to stop. It was an Israeli real estate company. The man who is accused of being the most anti-Semitic mayor in New York City's history was just outmaneuvered by an Israeli real estate company. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up, and it's only been a few days since he took office. He promised to use all the power of the state to completely control the housing market, basically to confiscate private property under the pretext of his socialist schemes.
In America, of course, there's an organization that has taken the right to rob us whenever they want. The United States Congress has given itself the right to rob citizens, as well as cities, towns, and counties. County officials, by law, cannot take away your property. They can only do so if they prove that the place where your property stands, say a house or a warehouse, is needed for something else. I don't know what else might be needed for some very important matter for them. For them, I emphasize. For example, get out of your house because the mayor's wife wants to build a shelter for the paralyzed, or maybe alcoholics or drug addicts on the site of your house. It doesn't matter now. Or his ruling party wants to build a road there, let's say to a house. Well, let's say to a house. A senator who got the city money to build a dam to block the river and flood the previous construction site, where so much was stolen that now it can't be closed or finished. In general, the city authorities can rob, a city resident can be robbed, but at the same time, you have to follow the rules of robbery and not any other kind of robbery. The rules set by the state Congress aren't for robbery. They should serve as reason and guidance. You can't rob the population. So Mandani didn't understand and thought that robbing means robbing, and I do whatever I want. I'm the mayor, right? Well, he didn't get it, and instead of the stirrup, he ended up, in the rear end of Marin, whom he was riding. The United States is not Honduras, where you can steal whatever you want, whenever you want, but there are certain people you can't touch. That's the rule there. In the United States, you can steal, but only according to strictly defined rules.
His entire election platform, the promises that brought him to power, have just been exposed as a legally impossible fantasy. Do you understand? Zokir Mandani ran with an extremely radical socialist platform. It's about, freezing rent for 1 million households, providing free childcare, and abolishing bus fares. Most importantly, to force unscrupulous landlords to sell their properties. A few hours after he was sworn in, Mandani visited a building in Flatbush, Brooklyn, owned by Pinnacle Real Estate Group. This is a real estate company that declared bankruptcy in May of last year after defaulting on loans totaling more than $500 million. We're not referring to luxury condominiums. Pinnacle owns about 5,100 rent-regulated apartments in 90 buildings in Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and the Bronx. And yes, the conditions were terrible. We're talking about more than 5,000 housing violations, 14,000 tenant complaints, over 40 sewer issues, lack of heat, cockroach infestations, exposed wiring, and collapsing ceilings. It's just total devastation. But the mainstream media and Mandani kept quiet about the fact that these conditions were the result of New York laws that didn't allow rent increases, which in turn made it economically impossible to pay for all the improvements needed for the apartments, as required by regulations.
The city banned rent increases, inflation started to happen and ate up the profits, and landlords were getting less rent than they had to pay to maintain the buildings. That is, I rent out a building into which I invested a huge amount of money, but I get back less money than it takes to maintain it. They didn't have any money left to do repairs there. Let's say, naturally, the city authorities are to blame for this, right? Yes, who else? But the city authorities, in general, authorities never admit that they are to blame for anything. And Mandani stated that he would take away the property of the owners of such troubled buildings, basically robbing the owners who had invested a lot of money, time, and effort into them. And after taking it away, he took it. Let's say he did, for example, he raided, took it, kicked them out, killed, put them in jail, I don't know, but after taking it away, you have to do something with it, right? He was planning to go to the wealthier residents of the city and take away their savings. He wanted to introduce a savings tax and use that money to repair the buildings and let the residents who lived there stay for free in the renovated houses. Well, and if not for free, then again for a price that was lower, which means when they started to fall apart again in 2 or 3 years, they had to rob the residents again. So, once again, take their money and once again repair the neglected buildings. And it's always like that. How long has communofascism existed?
These dilapidated conditions are actually the result of the very laws that Mamdani supports and defends, but that doesn't matter. It was at this moment that Mamdani saw his shining hour. Summit Properties, United States of America, the American branch of one of the major Israeli real estate firms, submitted a winning bid of €450, $1 million to buy out all this property that's in the process of bankruptcy. Mamdani immediately announced that the city authorities intended to intervene to block this deal. So his argument was that he claimed Pinnacle, the original owners, owed the city of New York $12.7 million in unpaid fines, which made the city a creditor in the bankruptcy case. But it was absolutely clear what his real goal was. Mamdani wanted New York, the government, the United Nations Limited Liability Company, or at least his approved far-left non-governmental organization to take control of these private properties.
The Israelis offered to buy and renovate the building, But Mamdani decided that he wouldn't let the deal go through and would simply take the building away from the owners, take it away, and all because he really wanted to. Well, why not let him take it away? Well, just like that, like Lenin, Bukharin, and Trotsky will just take it away, that's all?
Federal bankruptcy judge David Jones saw right through this, and on January 9, Jones denied the city's request, not granting any delay at all for the sale to proceed. The deal went through immediately, and Summit won the auction for $451.3 million. Private property will stay in private hands.
This means that all other attempts by Mamdani to seize private property and to nationalize or municipalize residential buildings, office spaces, and industrial premises are unlikely to succeed, but according to Sarant, that is the biggest or one of the main promises of Mamdani. 1 million people will live in the apartments, but they won't pay for them. And those who, in Mamdani's view, earn too much will be the ones paying for their housing. Oh, that's interesting, and it's way too much. Today it's about $200,000 a year, and tomorrow it's $123,524 a year. Or per month, day, or even 10 years. It doesn't matter. But really, any amount that the communo-fascists want to take money from, and how much they take, they'll decide themselves. They really wanted to do this and even promised it, and that's why those crazies, the insane ones, chose them.
And the federal judge told him, "Go to hell." Absolutely not. You don't have that authority, and the free market will decide who owns these buildings. This is, without a doubt, the first and most significant legal setback for the mayor, whose entire platform depends on government control over the housing market.
The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics would have collapsed if it hadn't controlled our jobs and where we lived. It would have fallen apart in just the first 5 years. New York is not a state, but it's a place where people live, where they buy things, where they relax, where they get medical care, and where they work. They really want to control things, and I really hope that in the future they'll suddenly realize that they won't succeed, although maybe they haven't realized it yet.
Our country and our cities are simply not suited legally or economically for socialist fantasies. And now Mamdani is already discovering that he simply can't fulfill even a small part of what he promised, and that's why he's now creating the perfect storm for an uprising. Those who are against socialism, like the residents of Staten Island, are already speaking out against him. But more and more often, he will have very disappointed voters from all 5 boroughs who are increasingly realizing that he is essentially a fraud. He is a socialist fiction. He simply isn't capable of delivering what he promised. And that means they can easily change their loyalty, their allegiance, turning away from the populist left and instead joining the populist right. And this not only fuels and highlights Ernst's conflicts with the growing separatist sentiments in Staten Island, but then, all over the city, primary challengers in the Democratic Party or even Republican candidates for mayor will start to appear. Despite everything, Zokrom Mamdani has just suffered his first major political defeat, and considering the absurdity of what he promised, this certainly won't be his last.
I'm actually glad that New York, having gone completely off the rails, chose this kind of commie-fascist option out of anything possible. I don't want to say mayor. The whole country is watching this experiment. Well, New York is New York because it's New York. And if it works out, if the people are happy, then they'll start voting for the same kind of lunatics all over the country. But if New York falls apart, if there's chaos, disorder, filth, crime, and so on, and there will be, yes, it will help explain to this current generation what we went through and escaped from. That it's not just a coincidence like there was a good idea, but the people there, in the Soviet Union, in the German Democratic Republic, in North Korea, they were the wrong people and the right people. That's what it means. They'll understand. This, the current young generation, those who are in their 20s and 30s, will understand that the idea sounds beautiful, but for some reason it doesn't work, and it didn't work for us, and it didn't work there either. Here and even right in front of her, they see that even wonderful, kind people don't succeed. And I really hope that in New York it won't just be bad, but it will be a disaster. I understand that there are many good, thoughtful people living there, and I wish them all the best. Of course, but it just so happened that you ended up in the clutches of the communists again. To put it mildly, yes, well, either leave, my friends, or endure it until the next elections. What else can I say? And when you get the chance, chase these creatures out with a filthy broom, and please find a filthy broom. I don't even know what that means, but that's what they say. Chase them out with a filthy broom. I just like that word, filthy. That's all for now. Until next time.